Hey there, I'm Scott Telek, author of the Swithen series of Arthurian novels, and the Swithen is actually the only book series that remains strictly faithful to the real Arthurian legend, just adding in the character development and connecting material to make it make sense to us readers today. Now, all of us have heard about King Arthur and we feel like, oh yeah, I know all about King Arthur because I've seen this horrible movie or watched this silly TV show, and I know it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, only stupid and boring. Only that's not quite right. It's true there have been more awful King Arthur movies than good ones, which we'll discuss in an upcoming video, but today we're going to talk about, if you look at the actual legend and what's there in the real story, what is it actually about? So the story covers about 70 years, give or take, and it's mainly about the rise and fall of a civilization. We have the state of the world prior to Arthur, which was the Dark Ages and chaos, and so he came in and institutes the country's first law and order by establishing what is essentially the first police force, which is the Knights of the Round Table. And they're tasked with going out there and righting wrongs and helping the helpless as they find them. So that's what we know, right? We know all about that. But it also goes on to show the limitations of that and how personal tensions within the society erupt and finally destroy it from within. So it's incredibly epic because we see this kingdom rise, reign, and then fall and come crashing apart. And more than that, we get deep into the nitty-gritty of why it eventually fell apart and failed. What else? Well, it's also a little bit like the Bible in that one aspect of it is meant to have a look at moral behavior and encourage people to act in a morally responsible way. So you have these knights who are very worried about honor and pursue this ideal of chivalry, and the whole concept of chivalry originates in King Arthur, by the way. And a lot of the stories are contained within the legend revolve around acting in a responsible way, acting correctly toward others at a time where there were no rules and no real reason not to be a selfish, immoral person. On a more personal, psychological level, it's an incredibly moving story about how the events of the past influence the present and then go on to influence the future. We see the problems and the gifts that are passed on from previous generations, and it's also about how the mistakes you make as a young person come back to haunt you later in life. The whole thing is incredibly interwoven and complicated. Like, you think Game of Thrones is incredibly interwoven and complicated, but it's nothing like the real legend of King Arthur, in which over 100 characters have their stories intertwine and interact over the decades of years that it covers. And that's one of the things I love most about it, and I'm definitely reinforcing and including in my novels, in that things appear at the beginning of the story, show up years, sometimes decades later, and how we have to escape the burden of our past only to find out that we're passing on new burdens to the next generation. Now, there's a lot of other stuff too, like the spiritual quest, the romantic angle, and the love triangle, but overall it's about those three things. The rise and fall of a civilization, a guide and examination on how to be a conscientious, moral person in the world, and how the stuff from the past influences our present and goes on to influence the future. So in the next video, we're going to talk about some of the things you don't know about King Arthur. The surprising elements you probably haven't heard of, but that are definitely there, like the demon babies, the matriarchal societies, and the gay knights that you haven't heard of because they've been erased from the story. So that's all waiting for us in the next video.